David just got finished with a trip to India recently, and I met David through my sister Mary and my brother-in-law Josh, and we had a nice dinner party together at their house, and we got to catch up and reason some about his voyage. And I want to take this opportunity to learn a little bit about him that I don't know, and to share this moment together.
Yeah.
So thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks, man. I really appreciate it. The interest and everything is really, just it feels good that you've taken this time to, kind of dig into it a little bit. I'm feeling kind of like I've got so much to share, and I'm still just processing so much, and this this process of sharing it is really important to kind of try to understand it all.
Imagine.
You know what I'm saying? It kind of feels like a dream already, and it's only been like a little bit over a month.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So you're fresh back. Well, let's unpack that a little bit. You went to India, and you spent how long there, and whereabouts were you?
Yeah. Well, it was broken up in a couple pieces, but the total journey was 6 months.
Okay. Wow.
So that about 5 months of that was just in India.
Yeah. Okay. Beautiful. Where'd you start, and kind of a quick overview of where you got around to?
Sure. I started in Delhi, and was in the northern region for all the way through the holidays, starting in early November. So from Delhi to a little bit east of Delhi to a state called Jharkhand, which there's a city called Ranchi. There's a special festival there that I went to for about a week, and then I went to Varanasi. It's a super ancient city, relatively in the same region as well. And then from there, I was able to meet up with a friend who came to visit me. We went to the desert region in the northwest, and then actually went back to Varanasi again, just so that that they would have a chance to experience that city, because it just had such a major impact on me. I really wanted them to see it. So I did a bit of crisscrossing in the first couple of months, and then they went back to the States mid-December, and I was back on my own, and kind of transitioned to another chapter from there. Actually did a visa run. The visa ran out. I was moving on these e-visas that you can get now, that you'll get them in like a few days. They're super quick and easy to get, at least if you have an American passport, which I from what I understand, I don't know how it works with other countries, but I was going on 60 days, like let's see what I can do in 60 days and see how I feel. I went with a one-way ticket. So I was leaving it open to stay longer. Just kind of wanted to feel it out, and by the end of that 60 days I was like, man, I gotta keep going, so I was looking for countries to jump the fence, so to speak, and to get to another country so you can reapply for another one. It's the way you're supposed to do it, and then make a re-entry. That's why there's a month kind of in between where I went to Sri Lanka for a month.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, so right, a lot of people don't realize that actually, and I've talked about Sri Lanka a lot less than India, even just for simplicity's sake. People are like, where have you been, and what's going on? I'm like, I've been in India, but Sri Lanka was like this whole other thing. Entirely. And
I understand they've had some pretty heavy political upheaval there in the last decade.
Yes, definitely, and even now with this recent terrorist attack.
That's right.
There's a lot of pain there now. There's a lot of pain that's being brought back. They've been through a lot, genocide type of stuff, even up until about 10 years ago. And so, I've got homies there now. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, so it feels, it just felt really personal. It's really weird. On my flight back, I saw the newspaper headline. My flight back to the States was in the airport in Kuwait, and I saw it. So it was, man. Sri Lanka is a big part of this too, definitely. So I went to Sri Lanka for the visa run, which has turned into its own journey for about a month, and then came back to India again, but this time in the south. So, right, like I said, I was in the north and did all that crisscrossing around, and coming back, I wanted to be in a different part of India.
Okay.
So I went back, went to Tamil Nadu. It's a city called Madurai, which is really, really intense, ancient city as well.
Well,
And yeah, I spent some time there. Eventually made my way all the way down to the southern tip of the whole country.
how about that?
This little place called Kanyakumari.
Well,
Yeah, where you can see the sun rise on one side, and then later that day you see it setting
oh,
on the other side. Yeah,
how
and
about that?
kind of a pilgrimage, very special place for Hindu people. Yeah,
Mm.
yeah.
And how were you getting around? Public transportation, or
Right.
India's a massive subcontinent. Yeah.
Right, yeah, I mean, there's, every way you can imagine, basically, you can get around, but at first, it was just tuk-tuks around the cities.
Okay.
Once I had to start jumping cities, I didn't really get the courage to do that on the train until after my second week.
Mm.
The people I was staying with, they were supportive and helpful, but there was one guy in particular, just like this young high school kid who was helping me translate. He was really concerned and worried. There's, he just, and for good reason. I mean,
Sure.
when there's peak time and a really busy time, when there's a festival,
Mm.
the trains can be a little bit chaotic.
See.
But that was the only time where I felt like the train was that chaotic and that crazy. All the other times taking the train around was actually all right.
Mm.
Yeah, I just happened to be taking it at that one really busy time.
Gotcha.
But the buses are, there's varying different levels of buses. So you can take like kind of a nicer coach bus. They call them sleeper buses,
Mhm.
or you can take these basic buses, they call them, or government buses
Yeah.
that are, very, very inexpensive and crowded,
Mm.
and there's no like AC or anything.
Mm.
So you're really kind of, smushed together with local people.
Yeah.
And I kind of got the courage to get into that a bit later in the trip. It had been some time actually, not even the first month. I don't think I worked up the courage to jump on those, because when you get there, there's no way to know when the bus is coming, and like you can't look that stuff all up like online. Really, you have to just go there to the bus depot and just start asking around the drivers, hey, this place, I have to go here, and they start pointing, and there's a little bit of it can be a little chaotic at times, especially if they're really busy, and then you just kind of take their word for it. There's no paperwork, you just jump on the bus, and then they leave, and then they collect money from everyone kind of once they've already departed.
Sure.
So you're
Committed.
you're committed. Yeah.
And how, speaking of asking directions, how did you encounter language barriers? Were you able to find people? Obviously, you found some people that spoke English, but how was that?
Right. It's all over the place.
Mm.
It's all over the place. But in general, finding people who speak English like well enough,
Mm.
like someone
Yeah.
will be able to help you out. I found in most situations.
I guess the British influence, I didn't even think about
Yeah,
that.
absolutely. Right. Yeah, exactly. If you go back, yeah. So, so they and that's kind of like the starting point, going back a few generations with that, and then, there's also just the Western influence, Hollywood, all that stuff, is kind of idolized, and they're really, like hip hop, rap is a huge influence in India. Yeah.
Sure.
So like I really wish that I had learned more Hindi going into it, though. That actually would have helped a lot. Because people told me, oh, don't worry about it, you can get by with English, but then like you're trying to get a tuk-tuk, or you're trying to get a taxi, you will run into people who might be a little bit older, and other than aside from maybe saying like hi or thank you or something, you're not going to get very far, and it might be a bit frustrating. Even showing them the map on your phone, I found 99% of the time was extremely difficult.
Interesting.
They're not used to using that stuff. So it would have been, it would have been helpful. I did have like a app that, would teach me some Hindi, and you know what I mean. I was kind of trying to learn as I went, but a little bit of practice beforehand would have been helpful.
Yeah, makes sense.
To further compound it, India there's many hundreds of languages, thousands even. If you include it's these different dialects between villages and stuff. So when you go from one region to the next, you could potentially run into people who barely speak Hindi, even if you're in a village somewhere. Yeah, so I did see people speaking to one another in broken English as the middle ground to try to communicate simple things at a little shop or something like that. They'd be trying to, figure it out. And someone from Delhi and someone way deep in the south. So, it's it's so much diversity. I feel like I barely scratched the surface of it.
Wow.
So it's really feels what it feels like. Yeah.
I can picture it. And leading up to your voyage to India, had you traveled much internationally?
No, not really.
Oh, okay.
No. Yeah, this was a huge step. This is a crazy leap of faith. Like,
wow.
I mean, it's like a couple childhood sort of little trips to, I went to Mexico. I went to Jamaica for a week with my dad when I was 11.
Okay.
We were at a resort on the beach. It wasn't really, I feel like, a big third world experience, and certainly not in my adulthood. So this was like, getting off the plane and just the vibe, and like that. I'll never forget that Uber ride from the airport to the Airbnb that I was staying at in New Delhi.
Wow. Like,
it was just shocking, truly. Like, like children coming up to your window and knocking on the window. This little girl came up to the window when we were at a red light, and she had a baby. I think the little girl was, I want to say she was maybe 9 or 10. She's holding a baby, and she's tapping on the window, and she's indicating like this, her food. I'm looking at my driver, who didn't look like he was any older than maybe 15, and he just seemed disconnected from it. He didn't even look at them, and I was kind of looking at him for like some kind of, cue on what to do, or what, what's appropriate here. And I was a bit in shock, and I had my phone out and was kind of filming, and then the light turned green, and that was kind of like, I was feeling already in my gut. I was like, what was I? So should I give him the money? Like, what? How much? Like, I don't, like what, So yeah, it's a big shock. The third world is it's not something that I feel like we can really do a whole lot to like prepare for, and other people who had gone to India have told me this. Maybe that in itself was like all the preparation that I really could have asked for, just kind of knowing in your mind, like, this is going to be something significant emotionally and spiritually, and it was like I didn't really want to try to have too many like expectations or anything. I went with this feeling of like, I'm just gonna be open, and just try to be adaptable, try to be humble, try to listen, try to observe.
Beautiful.
Yeah. That's exactly what I did.
Okay.
Yeah.
And did you observe, or I should ask, what kind of juxtaposition did you observe with the other end of that spectrum of extreme abject poverty? What's the other side of that? Because India is a developing world at the same time. Were you at places that you could see that stark contrast? Yeah, I mean, I wasn't seeking out stuff like that as much, but you do see it. Okay. So you're gonna see, a nicer car drive by. You're gonna see people going to work who are dressed, with nice clothes, and they've got, phones and nice phones, and things like that, headphones and stuff. They're taking the buses, and they're taking, the subway, or the metro.
in Delhi in particular,
Yeah.
like when you're in bigger cities,
Sure.
like it's much more of a contrast.
Yeah.
But especially like in like wedding
Mm.
season, it's kind of like, for us it would be like early spring. Weddings in India are extraordinary. They're so vibrant, and it's it's several days long. This incredible celebration, and they're expensive, and so you see, especially in times like that, where all this money is being spent and all these people coming together. There's people who don't have that money, and obviously you're not going to be having those kinds of bigger celebrations. So when you see something like that, it's like, okay, wow, yeah. There's somebody has money.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one always hit me, seeing the extreme poverty, and then see another side of that driving right by. Sometimes I think it's difficult as a person raised in the West to wrap one's head and heart around that. I think, like you said, you can be prepared to an extent through someone conveying a warning or a heads up, if you will, about seeing such things. But I don't know how we can prepare our heart to see a human living, sleeping on the ground with a child in their arms and not having any food.
Right.
So that always, I still don't know where to put that, to assimilate it into my reality here in the West, where we can jump in the car and go get some food right now.
Yeah.
And yet, it's the rule rather than the exception, I guess. I think.
Right.
My understanding is billions of people are living in that way. So I don't know what to do with that, but
I feel you.
enjoy being in company with people that have seen it as well, so at least together we can begin to process it and perhaps create some type of solutions towards more people becoming empowered. I don't, it's almost too big for my head. Like, as you relate that story, how many times I've seen that in developing world places where you see things that they don't necessarily map onto a reality here. Of course, we see homeless people here in Richmond, for example, heavy substance abuse issues, but to see children that don't have clothes and are sick, it's more than I think we're prepared for.
Yeah, it's kind of maddening, and it's maddening on this level where it's like it kind of grows exponentially, because the more you see it, the more that you have to kind of start shutting it out in order to function.
Sure.
Because I know what you mean. It's just too big for your head. It's too big.
Yeah.
And so it could start to make you feel a little bit like, I don't know if helpless is the right word, but just disempowered or something at first. And that's part of the shock.
Yeah.
The shock is like, whoa. And I would do things like, like, okay, let's go get some milk, or what the mother's saying, I need this thing. And I go, oh, okay. And then before you know it, another is coming up to me.
Yeah.
And then before I know it, like, I'm surrounded and I'm immobilized, and all the locals are looking at me just like shaking their head like, what are you doing, man?
Sure,
You must be new here or something.
Yeah.
And that's when I started to learn, like, okay, there needs to be some kind of balance, and I need to be wise here. You have to really like stay. There's an element of strength there, within yourself, that you have to be able to just kind of like stomach it a bit, but not be completely close-hearted. Just you have to keep moving when you're on a journey like this. You can't completely like shut down. And so that was tough also for me to have to start to learn how to say no, and when it's appropriate to step in, and when it's time to keep moving.
Well put.
Yeah.
As you're saying this, it makes me think it's another interesting facet of our culture, where we have the luxury of having relative stability and even comfort. Most people, we're not in a survival mode most of the time, so we think about things like problem solving. So when we see these types of things, we think, how can I eradicate this? And we're not used to, I'm not used to, on such a quantum scale of disparity. it's an issue dear to my heart, because I'm still not much further with a solution than I was when I first saw these things traveling internationally.
Yeah.
So it's refreshing to hear you having had the same experience, and of course it is heavy on my heart too that it reminds me I'm not in that scene very much right now here in the States of that level of poverty, and yet it's out there. So perhaps by us speaking about these things, the next generation we'll have some more solutions, so at least people aren't that miserable.
I think so, man. I really hope so. That's my my vision,
Yeah, I can see. So I want to ask you a couple of background questions. I want to hear more about the India journey, but what was your life like growing up? Where'd you grow up at, and what do you think your influences were on this trajectory to travel to a foreign land by yourself and kind of?
Well, I grew up in Northern Virginia, so
Okay.
yeah, I grew up in the suburbs of DC,
Okay.
which is that's Fairfax County. That's that's a very, very privileged place to grow up, and just economically speaking, school system, all that kind of stuff. It's there's a lot of diversity. There's a lot of I grew up in my neighborhood with kids from like all over the world, all over. And so that was normal to me growing up, and I didn't see that wasn't normal for a lot of people until years later. After high school, I came to Richmond and started to meet people and see people from different school systems, even just in the same state. So as I was growing up, I feel really, really, really fortunate that I had exposure to that kind of diversity. I think that did have a big impact on my perspective of other cultures, and what it's like to really befriend someone from another country and another culture. That kind of you just find a way, even if you couldn't always speak to each other really well. There was this family that came from Afghanistan one summer, and they had all their kids with them, straight from Afghanistan, like they'd been growing up over there the whole time, and then all of a sudden they're like here, And I remember them just running around, climbing the playground, like using the playground in this way that I'd never just had them blowing my mind. Like they weren't just like swinging on the swings and stuff; they were like climbing on the spine of the swing set and like balancing across it and like jumping down, and they're all over this thing. Yeah. They're like, look at this. I don't know. I wonder if they'd ever like seen one like this before, and there was something in them, some kind of fire in them, that I remember not being able to like process it or really understand what it was, but I remember feeling it. There's something about these kids that's different, and they had this energy that I'd never seen before, and that really affected me. Like I never forgot that.
Wow.
Yeah. So like, I don't know, going into my teenage years, I was super rebellious, and I grew up in a religious family, and I wasn't very accepting of that stuff. I kind of was very open-minded, wanted to ask all these really deep, questions about the universe, and I wanted all these answers, and all these questions, and those answers weren't really always available through the lens of the religion. It was more like, don't ask those questions, don't worry about that stuff. This is the plan, and I didn't like that, and I wanted to find my own way. So there was a lot of pushback, you could call it, up against my parents, and so I had to kind of start from ground zero, so to speak, just as far as like spiritually, culturally, I sometimes was left in the aftermath of that, feeling like I didn't really have a culture, because I was very perceptive on all the hypocrisy of the government, like all of the wrongs that have been done over the years, over the decades and the centuries in this country. You know, I really felt like deeply like this is not right, you know. So and I wasn't really getting clear answers on that stuff either. Like even in school, you know, so I felt like school didn't really prepare me or provide me with answers on why are there so many people who are so poor here, you know, or you know, people who are disadvantaged, like why are we taking care of them, or why are we does it feel like we're going into wars that we shouldn't go into? I mean, there's all this political stuff as a teenager that was really firing me up. And I think that kind of was starting to pave the way. It was starting to pave the way for me to see that I should step out and get a bigger perspective on all of this from other people's perspective, you know, in the world, and not just from within here, you know. It started to feel like kind of like we're in this like bubble world or something, you know. So yeah, that was growing up. I guess the point is that I was really searching.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Let me keep my head around, make sure that thing's running just fine.
Okay.
Yep, she's fine. So, nice, man. Yeah, you mentioned your, in my words, existential questions that you were having. Did you come up with any answers to any of those?
Not really.
Since the high school days?
I don't know, man.
Yeah.
Probably just more questions.
Yeah, I'm in a similar boat.
Yeah.
Funny how that is, the elusive answers.
I don't know, you know, it's like I spent all that time being angry and wanting all these answers and everything, but you know, it's like I have nothing but like love and compassion, I think, for all of those people who were around me in my younger years, you know, especially my parents and my family, everyone. It wasn't their fault.
Sure. Funny how that evolves. Yeah, we spoke on this. We spoke briefly about your realizations coming back to this country. I had mentioned how much more I appreciated the stability and, you know, the ethic, if only in theory, which I think it's more than theory. I think it's a part of the spirit of the United States. But can you speak on your experience coming back here, having been in India? Did your ideas change of this country?
I don't know if my ideas about it changed. Maybe more so just kind of reaffirming, you know, there's a lot of ignorance, a lot of arrogance, a lot of selfishness. It's kind of stuff that like I already knew was there and saw there, but I'm just like seeing it so much more. You know, coming back is like, you know, one of the first things that I noticed was that, I can understand what everyone is saying around me. Everyone's speaking English for the most part, you know, whereas that wasn't always the case when I was over there. And coming back, and as I'm hearing people talk, you notice that people are like complaining a lot.
Yeah, sure.
You know?
Sure.
And I'm not saying that nobody here has anything to complain about or to say, or to, you know, like when things are not balanced or not just and there's wrongs being done, but more like just like little stuff, you know, it's like little stuff, and you know, complaining about this or whatever, things that, you know, it's kind of like, hey, you know, that's, come on. You know what I mean? And that was like one of the first things that I noticed. And that's kind of course, just like kind of a tip of an iceberg, but it's like, you know, I don't know.
Sure. I'm also curious. I'm afraid I loaded that question and how I phrased it. Perhaps I'm loading it now by asking the follow-up. After many times traveling abroad, I started to have this deep appreciation that I had never had for the United States. Certain aspects of it that allow me to understand better in an ideological way why people are coming from all over the world to get to this place, to be here. And I experienced it last night in Virginia Beach on the boardwalk when there was a big New Orleans style jazz band with trumpets and all these different guys playing different parts. And there's every single color of person, and there's Muslim sisters wearing their headscarf, and there's people in wheelchairs, and I'm thinking to myself, this is the kind of thing that I imagine people in other countries think America is like. It's this lively melting pot of people. And I wanted to share that because I also am curious. You mentioned these things that I know what you're getting at with. I've experienced that with the arrogance and of people, and to me it's more like it's a spoiledness. It's an entitlement aspect where people have woken up every day and they have running water and they have a bathroom to use and they have to go to the bathroom, and many people are looking for those things every day. They're not just given to them. So did you experience a feeling of that, of gratitude, of being here? Do you experience this country different, having been in a place that's different?
Yeah.
Again, not to load the question on you, but
I know what you mean. Yeah, it's like I do. Like little, like for example, just like looking at the streets and seeing how like they're just like open and relatively clean. And like, I mean, people may disagree and say, well, look, there's some trash over there and there's some trash. It's like, no, but that's not even. It's like nothing. You know, it's like look how they have like the sidewalks are. You can actually just walk on the sidewalk. Like the sidewalk doesn't have like a sewer underneath it, and the sidewalk squares are like crumbling and caving in, and you have to like walk around it sometimes, and there's gases coming out of there that'll knock you out, and it's, you know, there's just wild dogs everywhere, and some of them have rabies, and you don't know which ones do or don't, and some of them are literally dying right in front of you, and you might have to just step out, and you might just see that on your way to wherever you're going, like, and then that's just going to stick with you for the rest of the day, you know, like, I don't think that we have too much of a problem with seeing that, you know, or like, yeah, of course, like children coming up and just like following you around for a long time and asking you for money because that's what they're trying to do, and really they ought to ideally be in school, but they're not in school. They're taught to go out and collect little tiny bits of money instead of like learning how to read and write in their own language. Like, you know, here you turn on the water and then the water just runs. Like, where's this water coming from? It's just clean water. Like, you can just, you know, like over there, I'm, you know, like, because I'm an American and I have these opportunities, I make money and go over there and be in that economy where my dollar is like, you know, goes a long way. I just buy bottled water all day long, and it's like, that's no problem. But for them, like, you know, like they don't, I mean, you know, so, you know, yeah, like the stuff that they will do there, like how hard they work, they're working like really hard, man. Like no end in sight, like, you know, like their work ethic, like they're pushing like every day, and they're pushing hard, and that's just to stay at like this kind of base level, you know, like, and then so it makes me feel like, yeah, like any like job that I would do here, like I'm gonna go work at a grocery store, I'll go work this, or I'll go do that, or anything that, you know, it's like, just makes it all seem like that's no problem. Like I should have no problem with that. I mean, you see people with these kind of egos and stuff like, oh, well, I'm too good for this, or I'm too good for that, and I don't know, you know, just kind of being at those kinds of perspectives. Like, it doesn't matter, you know, like just, I feel like, yeah, like all this privilege doesn't mean anything unless you do something with it, you know? So, yeah, just to kind of, that's kind of lit my fire. I feel like it's not just about me anymore. You know what I mean?
Powerful. Yeah, that really resonates with me. And tell me how, what were some of your different experiences? I know it would be impossible to generalize a blanket answer to this, but how were you welcomed or accepted as a foreigner there? What was your experience of that?
So, well, so
You're
I got
not the typical foreigner.
No, right, yeah. So I'm kind of like this mysterious character.
Sure.
And just in general, even here, people don't really know, is kind of confused of where I might be from or anything, you know, like that. And it's the same there. They often would think I was maybe an Indian guy from South India somewhere.
Okay.
That was. Yeah, that happened more than a few times actually. They'd come up and say, "Hey, what village?" You know. I'd kind of smile and look at them, and you know, almost like this drum roll or something was in the background, and it'd be like,
Sure.
"I'm from the USA." And
Yeah.
they'd be totally kind of starstruck, you know, because that's they see this, they say, "Oh, cool!" Like, and they want to throw out references. They're thinking Hollywood. They're thinking New York City.
Yeah.
You know, they're thinking all this. You know, they're like, they're excited. They're excited and very just they want to bring all their friends over and take a selfie with me. You know, they want to invite me over to their house. They want to hang out. They want to get my phone number, everything. I mean, they're really very, very excited and just totally starstruck and freaking out. It was almost at the point where I would be like, okay, better not tell them this time because I gotta make it to my thing in this. Yeah, if I was like on a schedule or something, I'd be like, all right,
time.
you know, yeah. But sometimes I would kind of spend a little bit longer to just kind of have a fun time and take selfies and pictures. But that was just in general on the streets, you know, and it seemed like in general, like the younger they were, the more excited they were, and the more kind of starstruck they were. If they were maybe of like an older generation, they might have kind of a bit of a head nod reaction, almost like they kind of want to cast a couple lines first to kind of see, you know, where I'm at, you know. You know, they start dropping, you know, political names. They start name dropping a little bit and kind of see how I'd react to that, and then they, you know, maybe they'd agree or not agree. I mean, you know, especially with our current administration, they sometimes would actually be supportive or not. Sometimes they get the perception is like, oh, you know, successful business entrepreneur. That's kind of like a, you know, they highly revered thing in a lot of places there. And I think the third world in general, they may not know about, you know, X, Y, and Z, man. You know, so I wouldn't see them as like, oh, like you're on the other side of the blah 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 line. It's more like, oh, this is just, you're going with what the info that you got, and kind of what, you know. I would never want to make any judgments on them, even if they were. It's like, I am not, you know, in support of this current administration by any stretch of the imagination. And with the language barrier, it was difficult to go into like why, you know, to have a full-on meaningful discussion. So a lot of times I would just have to kind of entertain the situation a bit and just say, oh, I'm not a fan, and thumbs down, and stupid guy, or something, you know. And they'd just kind of laugh and kind of agree, but I think sometimes they'd be just kind of like confused and like, oh, but you seem like you're really cool. That guy seems like he's really cool. How come, you know? It's kind of yeah.
So I'm curious. You strike me as being your own person, and my judgment is that you are comfortable enough in yourself that you have your own style, you know. And I'm seeking a way to ask this in a way that gets to my question. What were your influences? What allows you to be the man that you are, as far as keeping your hair in a way, of having some tattoos that are artistic, very possibly bring joy to people, very possibly being ire to other people. Look at that man's tattoos,
right?
His hair. You know, what gives you the fortitude to be yourself? You know, and I ask this as a man now that's growing into my skin more at almost 40, you know, and I'm thinking in regards to a young kid that lives in middle America, a boy or a girl, you know, or a young boy or girl in Denmark or in India, you know, that looks at someone like you, and you know, to me it's a flag of being oneself. You know, what's allowed you to be yourself so confidently?
Man, that's a good question.
Yeah,
That's a really good question, man. I mean, you know, it's been a long journey. It's been a long journey to this. I mean, you're very perceptive, you know. I mean, like, yeah, like I have my style and everything, but it's not just that. It's like I do feel like comfortable, you know, like with myself, like at this time in my life, you know.
Yeah.
And I feel like, you know, that like having a style like this can be a hindrance in some ways, and it also be like, it can also be like a doorway, you know, in other ways. So like, it's like on one hand, like yeah, like people might like misjudge me, you know. They might think that maybe I'm, you know, like problematic or something.
Sure,
you
sure.
know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I'm like gonna, you know, like, you know, I've got tattoos. Yeah, my hair is like kind of like all crazy or whatever, and blah blah blah.
Sure.
You know, they might see somebody else that looks like that maybe did some not so good things. You know, maybe they're trying to like steal stuff from the store. They're always getting in trouble or whatever. And there's like, we've got these stereotypes, you know,
Sure.
whatever, of course. And I think that because like I know like what my virtues are, you know, and like I really feel like I know, like, you know, you reap what you sow, like what you put out is going to come back to you, because I've like felt that and experienced that, you know, like very like loudly and clearly at this time. It's more about that. It's like how am I dealing with situations like energetically, like with people? Do I really like acknowledge people and really like see people? You know, am I listening to others? You know, am I really hearing them? Am I responding to them? Like, if you can do that, like, I would come up to places and yeah, like these little shops, sometimes they look at me and be like, whoa, for a second. But I wouldn't let that last for more than a second. I would just smile and say, hey, namaste, namaste G, you know, and they're like, oh, okay. And it would just, I'd watch it just like melt away, like within seconds. You know, but it's because I was intentional about that. It's kind of like, you can have a style that's like whatever, fringe and cool and all that, but you gotta like, you have to be like proactive about like dispelling those misperceptions. Like, you gotta nip that in the bud like right away. You know, like don't let their mind wander with that. And it's just easy. You just gotta stand up, you know. And if somebody needs help or a hand or something's going on, like, just do the right thing. I feel like you'll always know what that is. You know, so it's a matter of like listening. Really, you gotta like listen to your intuition. Like, it's there for you. You know, it doesn't matter like what religion or anything like that you are. Like, I think that we just inherently like we have that, and it's unfortunate that like through our traumas of life, you know, like that might get stamped out of us, and we become angry. You know, and so I think that there's like this process of like healing that has to occur, and like hopefully will occur, and you know, and so I've gone through a lot of that, and a lot gotten really real, you know, like with my traumas and my issues and stuff, and seeing like I don't want that stuff to like be like affecting like other people, you know. And so like looking the way I do, that's about it, you know, kind of changes your, you know, your vibe and your energy a bit, you know. When you're fully yourself, like, it's like, why would you want anybody else to be any other way, you know? As long as they're not hurting anybody.
Sure.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
Sure.
you're not hurting anyone, and then like it's okay. And so I feel like it's okay for me to just kind of be artistic and be myself, because I find that even people who look and are so different, you know, who you might never expect, like just looking at like our political lines or like our, you know, our upbringing or anything like that we wouldn't vibe. But I don't know, man, I found that that's like not really the case, you know. Like, if you're respectful of other people care more about that stuff than they do really about like whatever tattoos you have or whatever your stuff is. You know what I'm saying? Like, but you gotta be able to like take the first step in that. You know, so it's a little bit more work.
Yeah,
I guess it's kind of right. That's not
authenticity.
right. There's a little bit of a price tag, but it's worth it. You know.
That's beautiful. Thank you. You remind me. I used to think to myself, I'm a drummer, and I would play shows sometimes. Maybe I would play an event, and I play reggae drums a lot, so there's not a lot of reggae drummers in some of the cities I lived in, so I might play for 2 or 3 bands during an all-day event. And I remember one time I played for 2 or 3 bands. I ended up playing about 7 hours with some breaks in between, and I remember thinking to myself, where would all that energy have gone if I didn't just use it playing on drums right now? What would that energy be? And so it occurred to me while you were talking, it's like if you weren't yourself with the creativity that you've created as an external manifestation of who you are, where would that energy have gone? And it makes me sad to think of that people have an expression. And not that it matters one bit if you were clean shaven and no tattoos. It doesn't matter. And yet it's like a flower that didn't get to bloom. You know, and it's like, where would what a tragedy that is, that people live and they don't feel safe expressing themselves. Because I think that, again, it's almost like a flag to some people that you give a thumbs up to somebody to be themselves just by being you. And what a gift to the world, you know?
I feel you, yeah, absolutely. Especially to, you know, be kind of going through like this middle part of my life also, you know, to kind of show it's like, you know, we go through what could be called phases or chapters, and you know, people change, but I don't know, it's kind of, my style is just like a reflection of like who I am, and your style is a reflection of who you are, and so like, yeah, to really be real about that, it becomes kind of like an example, you know what I mean, like as you start to get a little bit older, and that's like, yeah, I feel you, that's important, like for people who are feeling like constricted, like they don't have, like they can't just openly express themselves, or there'll be too much judgment to even bear, you know, or outright dangerous. My heart goes out to those people, you know, and like, yeah, I would like to think that like just by being like fully free, even if it means that I'm not going to become like as like economically like successful even, you know what I'm saying? It's kind of, yeah, it's because like what does all of that like lead to necessarily, like what, you know, but like finding like a balance with that stuff, you know, like I, you know, yeah, like just keep it going, you know, because like life is, there's just like so many different waters, you know. Life will change, like we forget that, and I feel like maybe for people who are going through that stuff, I feel like it's maybe they're young and they haven't gone through life long enough to see that it really does like change, that it really can. You know, it might seem like there's no light at the end of the tunnel, because I used to feel like that for sure. Oh dude, yeah, I used to be super depressed and like really in a dark place, dark, yeah, for sure. And there was no light, you know, it was just over. I felt like it was like I just have to kind of dragging my feet through life because I just have to, and that's not a way to live. Like, you know, I've come from that to being here now, where it's like I am excited about life, and life is this delicious, extraordinary thing. You know, like that's transformation, and you gotta go through like a ton of pain to like get to that point. You make it to that point, and then you can like help other people. So I'd say for people who were going through that, so they can't express themselves, it's like you gotta hang in there, because like actually the world needs you. You just gotta make it past that hump, make it past that weird place in your life, that whatever it is around those people that you don't want to be around, like you'll get to a place where you can break away, you know. And then all kinds of other stuff will start happening. You'll start meeting people. You never know like who's around the corner, you know? Like, you know, it's like 1 second you didn't know someone, and then the next second that you do, and everything just flips around. Like, yeah, like, so like if you keep trying to adapt or try to always change your style to what everyone else is doing, and try to just kind of fit in with all of that stuff, I get that there's a certain like survivability to that, you know, especially for people who identify differently, like, so that if they don't want to be a target. So I could never judge anyone for doing that in like that kind of situation. I mean, do what you got to do, you know, of course. But then when it carries on through life, where you just kind of feel pressured by society, or maybe some family stuff, or friends at work. People do, I've seen it, get kind of stuck, and they're not expressing like their true selves. And yeah, that's really, really sad. I really try to inspire people, and people have told me, especially in the past couple of years, that like just me being like out there like this and doing this kind of lifestyle is inspiring for people to see, So I would want to continue to do this.
Beautiful.
As long as I can.
That's beautiful. Thank you. So I want to jump off of what you were just saying, because I think it's a critical conversation that not many people are able to bounce off with another person that are in these unique spaces of perhaps having an innate energy of creativity, or they've got something that's pulling them towards something bigger, and their experience is telling them that they're stuck. Their brain's telling them that they're stuck, or they're in a depression. So I'm of the belief that we do need to go through these depressions to allow us to have an opportunity to create something greater. That being said, beyond the organic changing of seasons and time and experience, can you recommend any tools or insights? Were there anything that you encountered that you recall that pulled you from that space? Any practical tools? Maybe not. Maybe,
Sure. No, I mean, I have to really think back, all these different chapters and stuff. I mean, the most obvious for me personally was music.
Okay.
And I think that maybe you're into music, maybe you're not, so that may not work for everybody, but for me, that's the first thing I think of, because it was just the most direct gateway to outpour all my emotion into. And it really, I would go into like a trance-like state a lot of times, even when I was a teenager, playing music by myself with headphones and the guitar, and just really going somewhere else. You call that a form of meditation. I think it was meditation. I just didn't know it at the time. I think that word is a bit loaded or tricky for a lot of people, because they think, oh, meditation, like Buddha or something. Like I'm gonna like what are you saying? I should sit under a tree, and they're not interested in that stuff. But meditation can be many different things. So, for me, I found it through music, and I found that to be really, really healing. Another thing I think it really helped me was I read A People's History of the United States by Howard Zinn.
Sure.
I think I was maybe 15.
Okay.
And that, for people in America especially, sure, why not people in the rest of the world, but to read that book that goes over the hardship of all of the most severely brutalized people, from the Native Americans and African American slavery and women and everything, like the history of this country from their perspective. To read that when I was so young like that kind of that was like, okay, like I'm part of like, there's like this long like history of like suffering, and I'm like, how do I fit into all of that? It was like kind of it planted a seed. I don't think I could fully understand it at the time, because at the time I was so young, and it's kind of just restless, angry. But I think it did something to me to kind of know, like, oh no, like there's been a much more severe, like, history of suffering than what I was going through. So reading and understanding about like what other people have gone through, like that's, yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like we as humans, we want to, it's part of our equilibrium of living. I think those of us who have the capacity to be perhaps a little deeper thinkers, people that are analyzing things constantly, it's really crucial to know the darkness or in the light, and vice versa. We have a curiosity towards other spectrums of perspective, and I resonate with you. I read that book at some point, and it was a real eye-opener. It really made me question complacency of being in a position of privilege, whether that's, to me, that privilege is, like I said, it's more about being in a place that we cut on water and it runs forever, or flushing a toilet. I think that anyone that has that experience, i.e. anyone in this country, is just so far beyond what the experience of people in abject poverty is. And again, it doesn't negate the fact that there are people suffering here systemically to a degree that maybe I can't understand, but it is an amazing thing to have that curiosity and to quench it with these experiences through reading, or especially through travel, I think, experience. So I want to share this. Time I have this fear of it cutting off now. Sweet. I want to delve a little more in the time we have. I want to ask you a little more in depth about India and the cultural experience there. One of my big curiosities is culture, and that's a rather elusive term. I think it means a different thing to everyone I ask, but in reference to culture, my understanding is you had experienced a lot of rare yoga practices, and I'm sure all kinds of other things that would be enlightening to other people beyond books or TV. What was some of the things you could speak of about that? What piqued your interest? Can you give me some?
Sure. I mean, thinking back on the yoga, I mean, I did go to Rishikesh, which is known as sort of a birthplace of yoga, and some origins of yoga from there in the northern region of India. And I was doing a lot of group meditation with people there. Stuff that's really focused on opening up your heart, being able to receive love and to give love to people without any kind of like expectation or any ego involved. So I know that sounds maybe a little bit vague, but it became a daily practice for me for about a month, doing certain interpersonal exercises. And so it was stuff that definitely transformed me from being kind of a little bit depressed and weirded out when I first got there to, by the end of it, I was like such a different place, and was really, really happy, and made a lot of friends, and it worked, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. Like, it became this, and this is stuff that, is, the practices are in the Vedas. It's very ancient. I don't know the full history of it, but they have access to it there. And there were this is like a class that I paid money to go to, and there were like a couple Indian people in there, but it was mostly people from the rest of the world. But at the same time, I was spending time with the locals who were living by the river on these rocks, and one of them was even living in a little cave of sorts, and they were talking about like some of the same stuff without me having had told them what I was doing. So it was like I was over in this class, and I would go to them and like, oh, and it's like reaffirming everything from their perspective. Yeah. And they, like, for example, I met this guy from Nepal, and he had worked in the restaurant industry to the level of ownership with some restaurants, and was not happy with his life. This just wasn't what he wanted. That he was having a lot of problems with that. Something like I don't know. He didn't really go into too many of the details. You know what I mean? But he was kind of at a fork in the road with his life, and he had this really profound spiritual experience where he felt really, really called to a spiritual path, and to give up this life of just working himself, practically to the point of just like numbness. And it wasn't really bringing him happiness, like something was missing, And he gave the stuff up. He went into the jungle and prayed and meditated for a few days by himself. And he came down and went to an ashram and changed his clothes and just started eating really simply and just started living out on the rocks. And he was given all these books about yoga and meditation and just started studying it. And now he's studying this stuff to learn it so that he can start a school and teach other people how to do it. And he's living in a cave, like by the river, a cave that like was occupied by some other people and then given to him, and now he's using it for the intention of passing it on to someone else.
Wow.
And he's so like happy, like that. I can't even describe like the joy and like happiness and like the vibe of this person. It's like extraordinary.
Wow.
He was just elated just to talk to myself and my other friends, and he never asked me for money once. Like, he never asked me for anything. And he was just, and you'd look at that, you'd look and see someone like that now, and that they would be judged just kind of like as a homeless person. Like, you'd see them here and you'd be like, that's a homeless person. You know what I mean? Like, that's what I don't want to be. Like, that person didn't do it right. There's something wrong here, right? Whether it's their fault or not. A lot of people will be very judgmental, and he's like on another level, like wow, man, And so I don't know, I guess like culturally, like that's acceptable, or I don't know what the word is, more like that's a thing that you can do. Like you can do that, and like the ashrams are like, he'll do little things like just kind of clean things up or whatever, and they give him all the food he needs, and if he ever got hurt or anything like that, like people would rally around and try to help him and stuff.
Wow.
Ever since he did that, like he said, it's like everything's been all right.
Wow.
Yeah.
About that.
And I just feel like he found his like way out. That was his way out of that trap. He had to like take that step into this kind of unknown, and he told me that his father told him like he would either be a king or he would be just nothing. He was thinking about that in his life, and now he feels like he is this kind of king, in the sense that he's the king of his own mind, the king of his own spirit, and we reclaimed that, And like, I feel like in Hindu culture, like, yeah, there's something to be said. I think I haven't traveled to too many other places to get a perspective of like maybe how that would or wouldn't work in some other cultures. But when I was over there, like, yeah, there's people who've done that kind of stuff, and it's, I don't know. I'm still processing that, I think.
Seems like that's what you're doing here these days.
Kind of,
like
yeah.
a Western
so,
contemporary of this man.
Like, how privileged am I to be, right? Like, his version of it is like living on the rocks in a cave and like eating a little bit of rice now and again and everything, and I get to, not do that stuff. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, I it's just on a different level as far as like, yeah, like your everyday, like your food you're eating and where you're staying and everything like that. Your pleasantries and your comforts are different. But like that shift, yeah, I mean, definitely. I was doing other things, working and making money and stuff, and I had to kind of make the decision to step away from that path, right? I mean, I could have like bought a house and stuff, but you know what I mean? Like, I could have done a bunch of other things. Definitely decided to do a different path, more nomadic path where I'm kind of really reaching out to my passions, try to really say something, how I feel about the future and where this is all headed, and try to inspire people as much as I can. In order to do that, I've had to like give up like kind of the straight and narrow type of life. And so I think he saw that in me too, because he was like, what are you doing out here? He had questions for me too, and so we were really vibing out, and And that was like right up to the very end, just before I came back from India. I was like hanging out with him and his friends. Yeah.
So are you, did this trip in your life now, does it leave you more optimistic for the future?
Yeah. The short answer is yes.
Cool.
You know, because like, you know, I don't even know if I feel like qualified to like talk on India as a whole and like where India is going. You know, I saw what I saw, you know, experienced, you know, what I experienced. But my takeaway is that like there's like people like there, younger people that want things to change like so badly. You know, they're like so thirsty and like ready to like get it going. Like, they want to, like India really wants to like come up, you know, and they are, and they've got disadvantages, you know, that they're working through. But like I saw like women, like in particular, like there was like this women's wall where they were holding like arm to arm. I don't know what the numbers were. It was just like millions of women like from one end of the country to the other in the southern part of the country.
Wow.
Across all these cities and villages. You know, like that's big. That was like a big deal, you know, like I saw that in the media and I was like, wow, like, you know what I'm saying? Like I feel like that's just like kind of the tip of the iceberg, you know? Like they're like definitely feeling like they're wanting to catch up, you know? And they're working on that. They're working on catching up and like really, for sure, I think that the future is like this sort of uncharted, vague, scary thing, you know, that everyone is kind of not really sure how to like acknowledge to one another, you know, like a lot of people feel like it's like we're screwed or something, you know, it's with what's going on in the environment and the planet and everything. But you know, I don't think it's gonna be, I don't think that we're screwed, you know, like I don't think that it's over. I think that the next generations are gonna have a really tough time, unfortunately. But I don't think it's like over. I think the coming back from India and seeing like just like how fierce like their third world population is, you know, and like how like hungry they are to like learn and to grow and to like expand. I think that it's just they just need the right projects to work on. They just need the right direction. It's like, what's, you know, it's like free energy, like let's do it, you know what I mean? Like they can, you know, completely rebuild their infrastructure, you know, everything. If like, so could we, you know. I think I feel like that's coming.
That excites me about the potential for technology. You know, probably 20 years before we put somebody on the moon, that was the wildest thing ever conceived. It would have been total fantasy. And the thought that, you know, I even think about things like climate change. You know, if technology was put to the use of eradicating those issues, who knows that in 5 or 10 years we could develop systems that take trash and turn it into power, or we could take, you know, change the environmental conditions to reverse certain climate issues. I mean, we've done relatively as extreme things through science, and I think perhaps the awakening of the heart in people more through adventures like we took, and through encounters with people that are seeing deeper than the surface level of things.
Right.
It gives me a lot of hope, because I'm of this school that believes every generation has thought that it was imminent doom around the corner.
Right.
You know, there was always, we live in such an amazing time, as you know, and to visit these countries in the quote-unquote third world. I used to think when I was in Ethiopia, I would think how this is basically everybody in America's worst nightmare of the conditions here materially. It's post-apocalyptic almost. It's corrugated cardboard and metal housing, and people with dying, of starvation sometimes, and diseases. And yet somehow the human resilient spirit, some of these people are some of the nicest people I've ever encountered generally. And it's like, wow, you mean you don't need material stuff to be happy?
Right.
And maybe that's just waking up in our culture here.
Yeah.
That's the case.
Right.
And maybe people are hitting a dead end in certain forms of materialism and quest for pleasure and things that are temporary. So it's really refreshing to speak with you about these things. How was your health there? I'm sure people interested were.
Yeah, it's people have been asking me. I got a cold a couple times, and that was not fun. The first one was a little scary because I didn't really know where it was going.
Yeah.
But I managed to not get food poisoning somehow. It was really,
That's great.
Everyone told me, everyone who'd been there before said, oh, you'll probably, get sick at something like that.
Yeah.
But I don't know, man. I was really paranoid when I first got there. Yeah, like I loaded up on probiotics and just kind of continued to take that stuff for the first month I was there. I was really watching the water intake.
Yeah, sure.
I was brushing my teeth with bottled water when I first got there, and then I was careful with things like condiments and the chutneys with the street food. They put water in that stuff. Just don't eat it.
Yeah.
I had like Indian friends like tell me this stuff, before I went. So I was really, really careful, and I think, I guess over the first month or so, I kind of started to build up, some kind of resistance. I don't know, but there were times where it seemed like I probably should have gotten sick, but I didn't. One thing that will mess up your stomach a bit is if you're on a really bumpy bus ride, if the roads are really bad and it's shaking you.
Yeah.
I mean, you get sick with that here or anywhere. So that kind of messed me up a bit, but it wasn't the kind of food poisoning kind of thing where you're vomiting for days, kind of like stuff. And I saw a lot of travelers around me get stuff like that. I think that they just dove in with like fruits on the street and stuff like too quickly when they got there, because they washed that stuff with the water. So I guess it pays off to just be careful, and just be really careful, and I mean, even if I did get food poisoning, like that wouldn't have been the end of the world either, really. You know what I mean? Like, So I was really careful, and so luckily nothing like severe, major happens, and yeah.
So you've done all kinds of artistic endeavors there, and I'm sure beyond. Where can people check out what you've got? I know you're in the process of editing some things.
Yeah, well, on my Instagram is the only place so far where I've been posting anything from the journey, and that's D Kenedy Photo. It's Kennedy with one N.
Okay. Good.
Yeah. So D Kenedy Photo, and then on my website I will be posting a bunch of photography as well as some video stuff. And I think that I'm still trying to figure out kind of where the video stuff is going to go. I think with the amount of stuff that I have, it probably would make more sense to release some kind of episode structured format, maybe on YouTube, so that it's kind of broken up into pieces.
Sure.
But I was filming just really very casually and intuitively with my phone, like on the streets, but it's a lot of just like powerful raw footage of India and Sri Lanka. It's very 2018-19, like it's just very, it's like a window into that world like right now,
Awesome.
So I really want to get that stuff out there soon. So, but whatever I do with that, I'll certainly be talking about on Instagram. So that would be kind of just like the cornerstone
That's awesome.
to get more of this. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, man.
You gonna head back there?
I really want to.
Yeah.
I really want to. I just got shivers as soon as you said that. Yeah, I mean, I'm still getting, messages from people over there and just friends and all these people I met. If I can, we'll see kind of where this work goes and with what it is that I'm trying to produce and if I can raise some funds. I mean, I'm definitely trying to raise funds for some nonprofit stuff over there.
Okay.
And so if I can really build a strong enough bridge and have things flowing back and forth, then maybe I can get sponsored or something. I can go back. But if not, that's okay. I can always save up and sponsor it myself in the next few years.
Cool.
I can't imagine going through this life without going back to India, to be honest. It's really
Beautiful.
affected me, yeah.
Cool, man.
Yeah.
So last question, it's June 2019. What's on the cards for you now? We're here in Richmond, Virginia.
Yeah,
what are you
man.
doing coming up now?
I'm soaking it in Richmond, I mean, I lived here for a long time and I've got so many amazing friends and I know so many cool people here. It's really been an important time for me to kind of recharge and just kind of have friends around me, make me feel like I have a place that I belong and I can kind of feel like I'm back into some familiarity and everything. It's been really important coming back from a journey like this and now that I feel like that kind of chapter is starting to come to a close as I've been here for a little while and I need to head back over to the West Coast. And I'll be in Los Angeles within the next few weeks.
Okay.
And we'll just kind of be back to square one, man. Yeah, just kind of be planning out my next journey.
Nice, man.
Yeah.
Sounds awesome.
Yeah.
I'm sure they'll be appreciating you out in LA.
Oh yeah, man. I'm excited.
Maybe I'll see you out on the other coast.
Yeah, come and hang
Enjoy it
out.
out there. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool, man. Well,
Yeah,
thanks
man.
for making this time to speak with me.
Thank
And,
you.
We'll link in the comments to your Instagram, and I'm excited. Anything I can do to support you, keep letting me know, and
Yeah, brother.
we'll keep linking.
Hey, man. You just keep doing what you're doing. You inspire me with this stuff. Seriously, I gotta get a tripod for my phone.
You got to, man. Between all the people we know, I'm sure we could make years of these
Absolutely.
things. And the hope is to educate, inspire, and unite. So
Yeah.
just fostering that curiosity with people, and I think speaking with you just reinvigorated me about how important it is to be ourselves and to honor that spirit of creativity in ourselves, and standing firm in that, and not being apologetic about it,
Right.
and being sensitive to recognize that a lot of people they just need that little push to have permission, if you will, to be themselves, and that's what a role that is.
Absolutely.
To be thinking in these realms.
I'm trying to stay, strong as that pillar of support for people who need that. I think that's super important right now.
Yeah.
For people, especially for people who have like the most privilege. I think for those people to try to be supported as much as possible.
Sure.
Yeah. So thanks for being perceptive and seeing all that, man. I see that in you too,
Yeah.
and we'll just try to help each other out as much as we can.
That's it, man. We'll do this again sometime.
Yeah, for sure,
Okay,
brother.
man.
Thank
Much
you.
love.
All right, much love, Dan.
Okay, cheers.
Yeah.